Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be in the world. Today's webinar is using JMeter to load test REST APIs. And what I wanted to say, firstly, Ariel, if you can just, while we're waiting, Ariel, can you actually, I don't think this is the latest updated version of the slides, now that I'm looking at it. I sent you earlier. Okay, but while Ariel is switching the slide just to the most updated version, I want to mention to the audience a few announcements. Firstly, thank you all for joining us. Over the next hour, we're going to be talking about using JMeter to load test REST APIs. We'll also show you how to run those JMeter scripts in BlazeMeter. A few items I want to mention first. Thank you, Ariel. A few items I want to mention first is that this webinar is being recorded. And everyone will receive the full recording in an email likely by tomorrow, if not by Friday. So just so you know on that. Secondly, our webinars are always better with questions from the audience. We will reserve about 15 minutes for questions at the end of the webinar. You can ask questions at any time, but we will reserve the time for later. The way to ask questions is in the Questions tab on the webinar control panel. We often get a lot of questions for these webinars. This webinar in particular has a lot of people attending. So the best way to get us to address your question is to keep them on topic, on the topic of today's webinar. And we'll do our best to get to as many as possible, but I can't guarantee we're going to get to every single one. Okay. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, you'll be prompted just to fill out a short 30-second survey. The reason why we encourage and appreciate if you do so is twofold. One is that we appreciate your feedback. It lets us know what you liked about the webinar, if there's anything you didn't like and ways we can improve for the future. That's how we know what the audience thinks. So we'd appreciate if you let us know that. But also, it will give you the opportunity to request a one-on-one or a session with members of your team with BlazeMeter to address your specific testing needs or any follow-up questions you might have had. So with all that said, I'm now going to turn things over to our presenter, Ariel Bell, who's a senior support engineer at BlazeMeter. Ariel, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ariel, and I'm from BlazeMeter, and I'm in the support and professional services team here. What we'll be talking today? We're talking about using JMeter to load test REST APIs. So let's start. What's on the agenda? First, we'll talk about what is REST API and how it helps us. How do we load test RESTful APIs with JMeter? JMeter basic elements, for those who are not familiar yet with JMeter, we'll show the basic elements and how to use them. We'll talk a little bit about JMeter variables versus JMeter properties. And then we'll show a demo of how to run JMeter scripts in general, and obviously how to run them in BlazeMeter and how to analyze the results. Eventually, in the end, you'll have time for Q&A. So during this whole presentation, if you have any question, don't hesitate to write it down, and in the end, feel free to ask, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as I can. Let's start. So, REST APIs. What is it first? REST is a software architecture style commonly used for web services. It's API that enables us to create, edit, retrieve, delete, do different modifications for resources that are located on the server side, and we need to reach them. How do we do this? RESTful API defines a set of functions that developers can use to perform requests and receive responses. And it's being done via HTTP protocols such as GET, POST, PUT, DELETE, and more. So we have REST APIs. We have those APIs that help us to talk with our backend and create new rows in our DB, delete rows, ask for JSON, whatever actions we have to do. But we want to load test that it can hang with and still work as expected under heavy load. How do we do this? This is where JMeter comes in hand. JMeter, for those who don't know, JMeter is probably one of the most commonly used open source tools for load testing. It belongs to Apache, and you can find it at the link that you can see below, jmeter.apache.org. And it's free to use, no charge. What do we need for us to create a script with JMeter? We need to do things. We need to download JMeter. The latest version is JMeter 3.3. And obviously, we want to load test a RESTful API, so we need some type of REST API. We will do this with HTTP requests, which we'll talk about soon. So let's go and actually start building our script. JMeter has a few important basic elements. The first one is the thread group. Let's go and start seeing it actually in JMeter. So we open JMeter, and this is how it looks when we first have a script. We open JMeter for the first time. The only thing we'll have is an empty test plan. It will look like this, a test plan, and from here we need to create our test. So the first element that we need to add to the script is called thread group. What is this thread group? The thread group is where we configure how many users we want to load on our target API. What will be the ramp up period? Ramp up is how long it will take for the load test to get from 0 to the target concurrent users. Loop count, how many times we want to each thread to run. Is it 1 time, is it 5 times, 10 times, or forever? Another important property of a thread group is this, action to be taken after a sample error. We'll add samples in a few minutes, but before that, just so you understand, a sample is, for example, HTTP request, and it could be successful, for example, to respond with a 200, or it can fail with a 400, 500 different response code. When it fails, what do we want to do? We want to continue to the next sample in our script. We want to continue to start the next thread loop. We want to stop the thread, or we want to stop the test. We can choose any of these options, and according to this, our thread group will act. We can have a number of thread group, not necessarily one, but for our example, we'll work with one. So this is the thread group. We have a thread group now. We have the thread group is we configured it. Now we want to have requests being sent to our API. How do we do this? We do this using HTTP request sampler. How do we add? I didn't show it. To add a thread group, you press right-click on the test plan, add threads, and you can choose different type of thread group. We won't cover all of them, but the basic is the base thread group is this one. So we added a thread group. Now we want to add our first sampler. How to do this? Right-click, add sampler, and we choose one of the many samples that we have. I'll be very quick. Some examples of samplers. It can be a binshell sampler. We can write a script that will run. It can be an HTTP request. It can be SSH request, OS process. We have WebSocket, different type of samplers. Feel free to go to Apache JMeter website and read more. We'll use the basic one, which is HTTP sample. Let's look at our first HTTP sample. What do we have here? We have the name of this is the name of the request. So I called it schedule test. We need to choose the protocol. By default, it's HTTP. If I want HTTPS, I need to add it. server name or IP of my target address, and my method that I want to use. If I press, I can choose which method: post, get, head, options, results. All the options are available to me. In this case, I will need the post and my path. So what will happen is that in reality, if you look at the URL in the end, it will be something like that. So this is how it goes. And you can also add the port number if needed, or content encoding, and in our case, it's not needed. Since we're using a post, we need to put a payload. This is where you edit your payload. It can be either a parameter or body data. In this case, I will need a body data. So I know what my API and target is expecting to receive as a payload. So in this case, it's expecting a test ID. It's expecting a JSON that has a test ID with the following value and some cron job. And this is the cron setting that I want. Cron is a format for running scheduled jobs of different kind. And you can read more about what each one of those mean in, such as in Google, search cron, and it's very popular format to use. In the advance of the HTTP request, the important things that we'll cover is first the embedded resources. When it comes to RESTful API, it's less being used, but even if for any reason you want to retrieve different resources such as JavaScript files, pictures, images, additional CSS file, you can mark this and you can decide how many parallel downloads you want, and this request will retrieve any embedded resources. That's what we need to know about basic HTTP requests. So that was the HTTP sample. Timers. Timers are very important for making our script work more like a real user behavior. If we don't work with scripts, the requests are being sent, or whenever a request is finished, immediately after it, another request will be sent, and that's not how, in reality, a browser works. Usually, there is between a few milliseconds to seconds, sometimes, until we do our next request. So this helps us to create this space and also make our server handle more efficiently the requests. So how do you add a timer? You can add a timer to any of the samplers or anywhere in the script. For example, you can add a timer here in the thread group. Right-click, add timer. We have constant timer. We have a uniform random timer. And if we add, for example, a constant timer, we choose how many seconds we want delay. And if we add it in the thread group level, it will be executed before any sampler that we have in our script. So if we have 3 samples in the script and we have a constant timer in the thread group level, it will be executed the timer before each executor. But if we add it to a specific HTTP sampler, for example, this HTTP request, I will click add timer, and I will add a constant timer. This timer will be executed only before this specific request that is assigned to, and that's it. And I'm just removing this timer because it will interrupt us in the continuation. So we talked about timer. There is another important timer, which we'll talk about it later on into the presentation. Let's run a demo. Let's quickly run a demo. I want to show you what I'm doing here. So I have this. Okay, this is a simple controller, by the way. Right-click, add logic controller, simple controller. It doesn't do anything at all. It's only for the sake of order and logic, for us to know what is going on and be more have a logical order in our test. So when I add this, it doesn't do anything as an impact, but I know that whatever is assigned to it belongs to the schedule a test execution. Under this, I assigned an actual HTTP request that will actually perform the request to schedule a test in my platform. And let's see what happens. I am gonna run this. How do I run this? Like, press the play button, press play, and something is being ran. Let's wait. The internet connection is a little slow. Okay, that's why. As you see, my loop count was on 131, and I only wanted one iteration of the loop. I will run this. I ran it. The test is over. Great. How do I know the results if the sample was successful, wasn't successful? What happened? This is where listeners come in. As you can see, one of the listeners is view result tree. And when I open it, I can see the running samples. And if I go to schedule test, I can see the request was post HTTPS to this address with this post data and the following headers. When I look at the response data, I can see what my response is. And this was the response, an idea of my job that I scheduled, more information about the job that I just scheduled. And if I go to the sample result, I can see important information about that request. I can see that the connect time was 631 seconds, 826 milliseconds overall load time, size in bytes, different information. And the actual important information is response code, which I can see is 201. And the response message that I got was created. So I know now that in my account, I just created a scheduled job for this test ID. Great. I have the information. I'll remove this as it's not important. That's the view result tree. View result tree shows us in order all the requests that were executed and if they were succeeded or failed. How do I add them? You can go right click on a thread group, add listeners, and we have different type of listeners. As you can see, there is many. The most common ones are view result tree, which shows you all the executions one by one, or you have a summary report, which every label will have one row, and you can see different averages and information. How many samples, average response time, error percentage, and more. We don't need this for now. So that is view result tree. Let's go to regular expression extractor. I ran a schedule test. Now I'm using my RESTful API. I'm doing some actions on my database, and this action is returning some type of a key, and I need to use the key for my next execution, for my next sample. How do I do this? So as you saw before, when I scheduled a test, I got back in my response an ID for this execution, future scheduled execution. Now I want to do something with this. How do I do this? Let me show you. I have this method here, but what it does, it returns this method. I give it a test ID from my platform, and it returns to me all the future jobs that are supposed to be executed. For example, let's quickly run this. I will show you. It runs, and You see, I have all this execution for future executions of this test, each one with his own ID. Now, I want, using JMeter, to take one of these IDs that I just created in my previous and do some modification to it. How do I do this? I use regular expression extractor. This regular expression extractor, what it does, it's just following. You edit. You go to the request that you want to edit to, right-click, add post-processor, and you choose regular expression extractor. And it looks like this. What can you do here? So you can decide where you want to apply it. You want to apply it to the main sample only, to a subsample. A subsample meaning when I get a request to some specific REST API call, sometimes it will forward me to another API call. So do I want to get on? Do I want to take the answer only from the main sample or also from subsamples? Where do I want to check? I want to check the body of the response, the body unescaped of the response header, the URL, the response code. What do I want to check? And once I decided this information, now it's time to actually get what I'm looking for. So reference name is where I want. It's the variable name where I'll save the response that I'm looking for. So I called it job ID. This is my regular expression. So I'm searching for somewhere in the response. I'm searching for ID and sometimes these parentheses, they don't actually mean I'm searching for parentheses. They mean that I'm searching for something that is anything that any letter, any length of letter that eventually will end in another parentheses. So it's parentheses, something, parentheses, and then I will get my answer. Template. Template is what from this whole regular expression, what do I actually want to save into the job ID variable. So if I will do $0, I will save everything that this is matching for. If I will do $1, I will only save whatever is in the first only in the first parentheses. So it will be only whatever is found in here. And you can go so on and so on. Match number, if there is a number of matches, you can choose which one you want. 0 will take random. If you have 1, so it will be the first, second will be the second. And default value in case that you didn't find this match in your response, there was no ID and something in my response, so put not found. Let's run this. Dummy sampler I want to show you how it looks. Dummy sampler, what it does, it just helps me to show JMeter variables that were ran in my test or existed. We're going to run this request that gets all the scheduled tests. I'm running it. So as you can see, the request went get to BlazeMeter with some test ID. And this is my response. My response is as such. I have, as you can see, here is the first ID and some actual test ID. And I have more. So this will be the first, second, third, and so on. So if I do, in my case, regular expression, I did match number 1. When I go to the view result tree and I will see the response data, I can see that job ID actually got the first response of the first responded ID. That's how regular expression work. Now this job ID, this variable, is saved in the thread group, and I can use it anywhere in the test. Now I can pass it on to another sampler and modify it, delete it, do whatever I need to do with this specific job ID. So this is how you extract different values into a JMeter variable. Let's go back. 2 more things I want to show you here. Bean shell post processor. Okay, bean shell, it's just this is a scripting language. There's a few different languages: bean shell, Groovy, JavaScript, a lot of scripting language. One of them is bean shell, and we can use bean shell to do different modification either in our local engine where we're running the script, or even somewhere else. In this case, what I want to do is whenever I get a schedule test and I extracted the ID that I'm going to do something with it, I want to write this ID into a CSV file. So later on, when the test is finished, I can either see all the IDs that I worked with, or all the IDs I deleted, or whatever I modified them. I want to see it later on. I want to see it in a CSV and save it. So what I do here is, here I'm receiving vars.get. What it does, it gets you the job ID that you want to work with. As you remember, job ID is the reference name of our regular expression extractor. And I'm creating a new file with this name, deleted test ID.csv. And here I'm printing ID of deleted schedule test ID is whatever I received here. What it does, this creates a CSV file, and let me show you. If I'll open this file, see it wrote down a lot, because before that I was running more. It shows you ID of deleted schedule ID and the ID, and this way you can, when the test is finished, you can get all the information also in a CSV file or text file or log file, whatever you need. Last but not least, constant throughput timer. What it does, constant throughput timer, sometimes we want to limit the requests per second of our test, because we know that our server can handle, that our RESTful API can only handle such an amount of requests per second. And if we do more, we will probably overload our server and crash it. So using constant throughput timer, what we do is, as you can see, this is just the name of the timer. But the important thing is here, target throughput in sample per minute. And that's important to notice, it's samples per minute. So if I do 600 divided by 60 seconds will give me 10. So each second I will have pretty much 10 requests per second. More than that, the test will not be able to execute. And calculate throughput based on, do I want to, for 10 for this thread only, do I want to have the 10 requests per second for a specific, for each thread on its own, for all active threads, in current group? We can choose, we have different options, and feel free to play with it. So this is the basic elements of JMeter. Now, before we move to BlazeMeter, the last thing I want to show you is JMeter variables and properties. This is two important and very helpful features of BlazeMeter. So first of all, what is JMeter variable? Variables are just, as the name of their variables, that the scope is in the thread group level. Properties are scoped through the entire test and can be used globally between thread groups. That's a huge advantage. Properties can be configured using a user.properties file. This file can be found in your JMeter folder inside the bin folder, and you can enter whatever property you want over there, and it will be available with every test that you run within your JMeter. That's another big advantage. Some JMeter properties can change JMeter behavior. For example, reporting configuration, logging, what to log, what not to log. I really suggest you go and read about JMeter properties more thoroughly in JMeter website and in BlazeMeter blogs. We have great blogs about it. And let me show you a quick few examples of it before we go to BlazeMeter. As you can see, let's go to my first request, my second request. I want to get a list of all the scheduled jobs. as you can see here, I'm doing a request to BlazeMeter.com and then to the following path inside it: API v4 schedules question mark test ID equal this, whatever this is, which is, this is how you treat a variable in JMeter: dollar, parentheses, and whatever the variable name. In this case, this is test ID. What happens in real time when this request is being executed? If this variable exists somewhere in the thread group, it will be replaced with some value that is in test ID. If not, it will be null and it will give me a failed request. Where can I see variables? So one way is variables through a regular expression as we saw before, but I only have one here, which is job ID. So it's definitely not test ID. Another place is inside user-defined variables. User-defined variables can be added to a thread group by right-clicking thread group, add, config element, and user-defined variables. And if I go to the user-defined variables, I see that I actually have a variable named test ID, and I can do two things with it. I can give it some ID 756248, and then this will be the value of my test ID. And when I will execute the test, instead of test ID, it will be replaced with the value that I have here. Another thing that I can do is use JMeter properties. And what happens here? To use a JMeter property, you can use either you need JMeter function to set to you actually get the property. This function, what it does, underscore p, it gets the value out of a JMeter property that's defined somewhere in my user property file, in my JMeter properties file, somewhere that I set this property. And what I do is I say, if I didn't set this property is not being set, use a default value that is this value. So in my case, I did not set my test property. So by default, it will get the default value. Test ID will get the default value of this function, which is 5908270. And this is why, let's do it from the beginning. I'll enable all, and I'll quickly go over the scenario. So I'm scheduling a test using my REST API to schedule a test. I'm receiving a list of all the scheduled tests that I have using a JMeter variable, and eventually I'm deleting one of them, which is the first that I received in my second get a list of scheduled test execution. Let's run this and see how it looks. Let's make sure that we run once. All right, we're running. So as you can see, this is a view result tree, so it goes by order. The first execution was made, schedule a test. I can see that the request went to this address, and the response data was this ID. This is the ID of my newly created schedule test. I'm then asking to receive all my schedule tests. I received this list of schedule tests. I'm extracting the first one, which is 5A. This ID ends in 9, and eventually I delete it. I go to request, I say delete. Delete is my method, and this is the URL of my REST API. And my sample response is 204, meaning I was actually able to delete this schedule test, and it won't run as it was deleted. This is the basic flow of JMeter with REST APIs. You can complicate it with a lot of logic by going to the thread group, add logic controllers, and you have lots of logic cool and actually very helpful controllers such as an if, only once, random controller, which has a choose randomly between executors, or a throughput controller, which throughput meaning you can tell it 80% of the time do this, execute this sampler, the rest of the time, the rest of the percentage don't execute this controller. Very great and helpful tool. So this is JMeter. JMeter is amazing. It's commonly used, and eventually you'd like to create loads from different locations, because once your application is being loaded with traffic from different location, you want to verify that no matter where the traffic is coming from, the response time is according to whatever you expect it to be, and that there is no errors. So how do you do it from different location in the world, and not only from your computer that is located in a specific location? This is where BlazeMeter comes in hand. This is BlazeMeter. Let's duplicate this page and go to my platform. This is what it looks like. a.bazemeter.com. This is my personal page. If I will go here and I want to create a test, this is my project that is called webinar January 18, and I go and create a test. I can choose JMeter, Taos, which is an open source that we also contribute and use. Let's go and create a JMeter test. What do I have in front of me? I have the JMeter test. Here I need to upload my script, the CSV that I use, and any other file that needs to be along with my script. I can choose the location I want to run from. We have lots of locations: Virginia, London, Ohio, California. There's location in Europe, in Asia, in all around the world. And we work with different providers: Google, Azure, AWS. You choose the amount of users that you want to run. For example, 1,500 users, with a ramp up of 5 minutes, so 300 seconds. How many iterations and the duration of the test? And 2 hours. So this will run 1,500 users for 2 hours with the script that I've uploaded here. I uploaded the script. Let's upload a random script, and I give it a name, and I say my test, and save it. I will now just press play and launch server, and the test will start. We don't want to wait. I'll start it in the background, and in the meantime, I will show you something else. This is how a report looks like. As you can see, you have a summary: how many users were ran, average throughput, errors, average response time, 90% response time, average bandwidth, different information. The test ran for 20 minutes. From Ohio East, you can see the graphs, the ramp up. You can lower, if you want, you can grab and go deeper and focus more on specific parts of your test. What else is interesting? I can go to the request stats and see for each sample that I ran during the test, how many samples were ran, what's the average response time. So if in the summary it was for the whole test as a whole, here I dig in for each sample on its own, and I can find specific places where my application server and my RESTful API is not acting as expected. So I see that for delete schedule test, I ran this amount of samples with this average time, response time, and it failed on 4.99% of the time. And I can download it as a CSV and enter it and import it to other system and work with it with whichever product, other completing products that you need. Timeline report. In the timeline report, you can see graphs, but also, again, if in the summary we saw it for each, if in the summary we saw it for the whole test, here we can see graphs for specific label, and or for a specific metric that we want. For example, let me show you. I can see how many users ran delete schedule test. So I see that 1,000, eventually 1,002 users were running this request. Errors. In the errors, I can see very easily how many errors I had and what type of errors. So I can choose to see it by label or by response code. So if I go to a label, I open specific label and I see that delete schedule test had 441 this amount of times with this description, and get schedule test at 500, which is server unreachable, 200 and 2,000 something. Or I can choose to show by response code. So I see 400 happened this amount of times, and I can open and see which labels had this response code, and so on. Let's just quickly, I'll show you how does it look in real life. And I believe we're ready for question. What did I show you? I want to go back just to do a quick summary of my demo. We talked about what are RESTful API. We talked about how to load test RESTful APIs with JMeter. We showed JMeter basic elements, JMeter variables versus JMeter properties. I showed you a demo of JMeter as well as demo of BlazeMeter, and how to run in BlazeMeter for reporting and scalability. It's very easy. With a press of a button, you just choose the places and go and have fun.
Okay, great.
I think it's time for questions.
Thank you very much, Ariel, for the presentation. To remind people, hopefully everybody can hear me okay, to remind people that you can ask questions if you have not already in the questions tab on the webinar control panel. We already have a bunch of questions that have come in over the course of the webinar, but you can continue asking over the next few minutes. As I mentioned before, I can't guarantee we'll get to every single question, so just try to keep it on topic of today's webinar, which is how to use JMeter and BlazeMeter by extension to load test REST APIs. So Ariel, I'll read out some questions to you and then I'll let you answer them. So I will start with some of the JMeter questions that came in earlier, and then we'll get to some of the BlazeMeter ones as well. Somebody asked, where can he add headers for an HTTP request, i.e. an access token that has to be used for authorization?
That's a great question. And I wanted this question to show up, and I pre-made this, as you can see. So there's two places where you can add headers. You can add the headers in the thread group level, just like I did here. So I have some authorization key and its value. And so if I had it in the thread group level, it will be added to each request along the thread group. And if I want to add a specific header to a specific request, I right-click the request that I want, for example, schedule test, right-click, add, config element, and HTTP header manager, which is exactly the same as we have in the thread group level. And as you can see, you'll be able to add any header that you want for that specific request. So for example, here in schedule test, I have a header that I added, which is content type application JSON. So this is how you add headers.
Okay, great. Just to repeat something I said at the beginning of the webinar, I see that some people are still asking it by questions. The webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive the full recording in an email probably by tomorrow, if not by the end of this week. Okay. Ariel, can you show again where you can get the regular expression extractor, like how it first comes up in JMeter?
All right. Let's make a new, I'll make it new so it's clean and easy for everyone. I add a thread group. That's the first thing we need. And then I add some type of sample, so HTTP request. And if I go right-click on that request, add post processor. It can also be pre-processor or post-processor. If I go to the post-processor, I see a regular expression extractor. And once I press it, I have all the information to fill, and it will work with whatever I want.
Okay, great. And I even saw a question that came in recently where people were asking more information, where they can learn more about topics such as the regular expression extractor. Stay tuned just for a few minutes. After the Q&A, we'll give a series of places where you can get a lot more information about JMeter, both in video forms and in blog form. So this we'll give you those links in a few minutes. Okay. So someone asked before, he's talking about, it was during your JMeter presentation. He says, my application gets headers and data part in response in the get function. How to capture the data part of it? I can see the response headers, but not the data. I don't know if you're able to answer that without seeing like what he sees specifically.
Can you repeat? You can quickly repeat the question?
Yeah, somebody wrote earlier, my application gets headers and the data part in response in a get function. How can he capture the data part of it? He can see where the response headers, but not the data part.
So if you go to thread group listener and you add view result tree, as I showed before, you can, in the view result tree, you can configure what information you want to save. So you can decide to save the sampler data, as it shows here, save sampler data. And then if you press this and save as an XML, once you run the test, it will actually save the data.
Okay, great. Okay. Somebody asked, we'll take one more JMeter question just for now, and then we'll take some BlazeMeter ones, and then we'll come back to some JMeter ones. But somebody asked, in the constant throughput timer, does samples per minute include all the HTTP requests or a particular HTTP request?
Depends if, in the constant throughput timer, it depends if it's assigned. Just like any other timer, depends if it's assigned to a specific, if it's assigned to a specific thread, depends on the thread group and on the setting. As I'll show you here, if I go right thread group timer, constant throughput timer, this is where it's calculates beta. So it's not for specific, it's not based on a specific sampler, but it's based on rather thread, a specific thread group, specific thread that are entirely running in tests, and so on.
Okay,
for
great.
more information about this, I would suggest to go to Apache, JMeter.apache.com.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was going to say we'll show some of those links in just a couple minutes.
All right.
Okay, so we'll start things off with the BlazeMeter question. Somebody just asked in general, if we can give kind of a short response, but what's the difference between running a JMeter test in JMeter versus running it in BlazeMeter?
So BlazeMeter is not a competitor of JMeter. Let's put this clear. BlazeMeter takes JMeter as a tool to run tests. What we enable is, if you run JMeter today and you want to run it from different location, you will have to create JMeter engines and in different locations in the world. You'll have to make the implementation. You'll have to take care that it's running and everything is working expected. And every time there is a new feature, update it. We take all the hassle from maintaining this different environment in different locations of the world, and we do it easier for you. All you have to do is upload your script. It's the same JMeter script that you run locally. You use JMeter to create it. You just upload it to BlazeMeter, and then instead of maintaining different environments in different locations in the world, you just choose the location where you want to run the script from, and we do all the rest in the background for you.
Okay, a few more questions about BlazeMeter. Someone wants to know, how do you store CSV files in BlazeMeter? Actually, no, specifically to Bean Shell. Maybe let's come back to that in a few minutes. I'm just looking at others. Is the virtual users in BlazeMeter the same as number of threads in JMeter?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm just looking at a few more.
By the way, I started just to show you. This is a run. As you can see, I'm running 1,500 users currently in BlazeMeter with the test we just created, and we see the errors and the average throughput, and we can start digging in to each request and filter it according to if we had different location and filter to different location, and it's a awesome platform that
Okay.
is very quick to and easy to use.
Okay, so more questions about BlazeMeter, and then we'll go back to some about JMeter.
Sure.
Can we use our own load generators to push the load in BlazeMeter?
Yes, you can do this. We have if your the target URL is internal and it's not available to the public, you can use your own engine to create the load and then send the traffic to BlazeMeter.
Okay. Somebody also wanted to know, let's see, there was one more question. This might be a similar question to that about on-premise, but as you showed during the webinar that the JMeter script was uploaded into BlazeMeter, but can BlazeMeter be used to run on a local machine the way that JMeter is able to do?
This is more related to the way to what I've said before. BlazeMeter it's not a product that you install on your computer. BlazeMeter utilizes and orchestrates other open source such as JMeter. So you'll always run JMeter. Now the question is if you'll use JMeter locally and then you own the engine and you create everything and you maintain the environment, or you run it in BlazeMeter and then the only thing you need to do is upload your script and we have the engine that creates the load and provide you enhanced reports and everything that is included.
Okay. A few people asked questions about sorry, just one second. A few people asked questions about integrations with CI and CD tools. Okay, so both about JMeter and specifically, one is I'll say that with JMeter, we have a really good article on our blog. Somebody asked specifically about how to run JMeter tests with Jenkins. But Ariel, in general, maybe I just want to, if you wanted to kind of talk about or show some of the CI tools that BlazeMeter integrates with.
So we integrate with Jenkins. We have a great plugin that you can download and install from the Jenkins system, and just all you have to do is you enter your username and password and your key for BlazeMeter, and you can run and integrate any JMeter test in your build platform. And if for any reason the test fails according to the criteria you decided, you can fail the build, or if it passes, continue to the next step or finish and pass the build. And we have it for Jenkins, we have it from Bamboo and TeamCity.
Okay, let's go back to some of the questions related to the core topic, and then we'll wrap things up. I'll ask you a few more questions. One of them is somebody asked, the regular expression I can use to get information from response, is it an XML or a JSON request? Would you know that?
Okay, so as in my example, as you've seen, I used the JSON. The response was a JSON. In the end, it doesn't. If it's a JSON or is it an XML, it's eventually if you look at it, you can look at it as it's characters, and you're searching for characters inside a response. So sometimes, let me show something interesting. So the regular expression can work both on JSON and the XML answer. It doesn't matter because it's a body, it's a response. But JMeter has, if I go to the post processor, as you can see, it has a JSON path extractor, which is an XML format post processor. So If a regular expression doesn't work for you, you have an easier way for JSON, like for example, to retrieve specific values using JSON format post-processor, JSON path, I'm sorry, and you also have the XML format post-processor. Whatever works for you and easy for you, you can use. This one is very easy. It's just like any dollar, dot, and then you can start with the different values and receive whatever you need.
Okay, let's maybe just ask, like, we'll get to like 2 more questions. I'm just looking for some good ones that are on topic. So somebody asked, it's a general JMeter questions about, are there other scripting languages you can use besides Bean Shell?
Yes, as I mentioned before, Groovy, which is today the most, it's the strongest language in JMeter. So Groovy is available, Bean Shell is available, JavaScript is available. If I go to JMeter and I go to, and I go right click and go post-processor. So as you can see, you have Groovy, Bean Shell, different JAX, JavaScript. You have a number of languages. You can find them here. And if there's anything else, you can create your own jar and add additional. But this is the default languages, scripting languages that come in with JMeter.
Okay, and we'll do one more question. Hold on. So first, we'll do, it's 2 quick questions. One of them, I think you covered both these things, but one of them is, somebody asked, how do you connect JMeter to a BlazeMeter test in a website? I think you just showed, I mean, before, just very quickly, like where to upload your JMeter script to BlazeMeter. I don't know if you just want to show that
So
again
if
quickly.
I go create a test, I choose a JMeter test, and I just upload it here. As it says, upload the JMeter script, CSV, and or jar files. You either drop or you press and you choose the desired.
And then also somebody asked about BlazeMeter, if, can you get live statistics in BlazeMeter during a test?
Yeah, as you can see, this is a running test. It keeps updating all the time. And you can, just like a test that was finished, we provide real-time statistic and analytics of the test. This is live now, what you see.
Okay. Fine. So I just want to say, Ariel, if you can show those that final slide with the links at this point. We had a number of questions that we had many dozens of questions, to be honest, that we couldn't get to. But some of them I can see we do have previously recorded webinars on that topic or blog posts. I'll try to get to as many of those questions as I can in the coming days and respond to you via email to get you the information that you need. Excuse me. Okay, but I did promise that we will give some links where you can find a lot more information about JMeter and BlazeMeter. One of them is that you should know that BlazeMeter is you can create a free account at any time. You can get your BlazeMeter account and start testing right away. That's at www.blazemeter.com. You should see a link there for start testing now. You can also request a demo there as well from one of our sales representatives as well. We also have, for those familiar or not familiar with our blog, which is at blazemeter.com/blog, we have, I would say, and I'm not exaggerating, probably about 600 or 700 articles on every use case of JMeter imaginable. These are JMeter focused. It's not like even selling BlazeMeter too much, but it's very much in detail and technical. And for all different levels and all different range of questions, you should check out our blog. It's very much worth it. We also we do webinars about once every 2 weeks, and we have done a few dozen webinars in the past. You can find all of those and you can look at them for free at blazemeter.com/resources. In addition, if you want to know more about the BlazeMeter product itself and have any questions there, you can find a bunch of information at our knowledge base, which is at guide.blazemeter.com. Finally, Ariel also mentioned Apache Groovy as a scripting language alternative. You can check out that at Groovy lang.org. Of course, what's not here, by the way, is you can also install JMeter at any time. They just look up JMeter. You'll find that it's obviously a free and open source tool, and you can check that out at any time. I think we've run out of time. Again, we'll try to get to some of the questions we didn't answer. Also, a couple of other reminders. Firstly, the webinar was recorded. Please keep an eye out for the recording it by email, either tomorrow or by Friday. And one final reminder, if you can, also please fill out the survey now that's going to pop up. It just takes literally about a half a minute to fill out. Give us your feedback on how the webinar went, whether it was valuable for you or not, or how we can make it better in the future. And let us know if you would like to request a follow-up one-on-one session or for you and the members of your team. Thank you very much to our presenter today, Ariel Bell. We really appreciate the many people who attended today, and have a great day wherever you may be. Bye, everyone.